Welcome back to Rainbow Nation Radio, where we explore South Africa through American eyes. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jessica.
Today we're diving into a story that sounds like something from a history book, but it's very much happening today. Segregation in the 21st century? It sounds unbelievable, but there's a town in South Africa that's still whites only, 30 years after apartheid ended. Let's talk about the controversial story of Orania.
Wow, that's shocking. I had no idea something like that could still exist in modern South Africa. How is that even possible?
Well, it's a complex situation that really gets to the heart of South Africa's ongoing struggles with racial integration. Orania was founded in 1991, right at the end of apartheid, by a group of conservative Afrikaners who wanted to create a haven for their culture. The town operates in a legal gray area by setting itself up as a private company where all residents are shareholders.
That sounds like a clever workaround. But surely it goes against South Africa's constitutional values of equality, right?
Absolutely. It's a major point of controversy. What's particularly troubling is the town's origin story. It was founded by Karel Boshoff, who was actually the son-in-law of Hendrik Verwoerd, one of the key architects of apartheid. And get this, when they bought the land, they forcibly evicted the existing black and colored residents, some violently, to create this whites-only enclave.
Oh my God, that's horrible. So they basically recreated apartheid-era forced removals right as the country was transitioning to democracy?
Exactly. It's a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained these racist ideologies were, and in some cases still are. But here's the really surprising part. Orania hasn't faded away over time. In fact, it's grown from a few hundred residents in the 1990s to around 3,000 people today. They've developed their own currency, schools, and businesses.
That's, kind of impressive in a really disturbing way. But why has the government allowed this to continue? You'd think they'd crack down on such blatant segregation.
You'd think so, right? But the ANC government has taken a surprisingly hands-off approach. In the early years, they saw it as a minor irritation that would fade away on its own. There have even been high-profile visits by ANC leaders, including Nelson Mandela and Jacob Zuma, which some see as legitimizing the town's existence.
Wait, even Mandela visited? That seems so contradictory to his vision of a unified rainbow nation.
It does, doesn't it? Mandela's visit was framed as an act of reconciliation, but many critics argued it went too far. More recently, there are even reports of the ANC potentially working with pro-Orania political groups in the Northern Cape province. It's a really contentious issue.
So, how do the people of Orania justify their whites-only policy these days? They can't be openly promoting apartheid-era racism, can they?
Well, they've gotten more sophisticated in their messaging. They frame it as preserving Afrikaner culture and self-determination, comparing themselves to indigenous communities with cultural autonomy. But it's a false equivalence. There's a world of difference between historically marginalized groups maintaining some cultural rights and a community explicitly excluding others based on race.
Right. Well, that's what it sounds like. A pretty blatant attempt to rebrand apartheid-era segregation as cultural preservation.
Exactly. And that's why many anti-racism activists in South Africa see Orania as such a problem. It's not just about this one small town. It's about the principles at stake. Can South Africa truly move past its apartheid history if it allows these kinds of racial enclaves to exist?
It really does seem to cut against everything the post-apartheid rainbow nation is supposed to stand for. So what's the future looking like for Orania? Will it continue to exist indefinitely?
That's the million-dollar question. For now, it seems entrenched, with plans to grow to 10,000 residents in the coming years. But there's increasing scrutiny and criticism, both within South Africa and internationally. Many argue that the government needs to take a firmer stance.
I can see why. It's like a symbol of all the challenges South Africa is still grappling with decades after apartheid. But what about legal challenges? Couldn't the government shut it down on constitutional grounds?
Well, Theoretically, they could challenge Orania's status, arguing that it violates principles of equality and non-discrimination. But it would likely be a long, messy legal battle. And there's always the risk of sparking broader unrest or resentment among some Afrikaners if it's handled poorly. It's a real political minefield.
Oh, I see. So they have to balance addressing the injustice while avoiding inflaming tensions. That's tricky.
Exactly. And you know, it's not just an external controversy. Orania is also a source of division within the Afrikaner community itself. Many Afrikaners are deeply uncomfortable with it and see it as an embarrassing relic of the past that damages their reputation.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about how other Afrikaners might view the town. I guess it perpetuates harmful stereotypes about their whole community.
Absolutely. There are plenty of Afrikaners who are fully committed to building an integrated, multicultural South Africa. But Orania casts a long shadow. It's worth noting, though, that economic realities might eventually force change. As South Africa continues to develop and integrate into the global economy, Orania might find it increasingly difficult to maintain its isolation.
That makes sense. It's hard to imagine a small, isolated community thriving long-term in our interconnected world.
Exactly. And there's also the question of younger generations. As more young Afrikaners grow up in integrated, multicultural environments, will they still be drawn to a place like Orania? Or will it increasingly be seen as an anachronism, a relic of their grandparents' era?
Well, this has certainly been an eye-opening discussion. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but one that's crucial for South Africa to grapple with as it continues to work towards becoming a truly equal and integrated society.
Couldn't agree more. These are the kinds of tough conversations South Africa needs to have as it continues to wrestle with the legacy of apartheid and chart a path forward. Orania may be a small town, but it represents big questions about identity, equality, and what it means to be South African in the 21st century.
Absolutely fascinating. Thanks for sharing all this insight into such a complex and contentious issue.
My pleasure. This is Chris.
And Jessica.
We are signing off from Rainbow Nation Radio, where we explore South Africa through American eyes. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to join the conversation. Stay curious, stay kind, and we'll see you next time.